was thinking about Hebrews chapter 10. So I'm going to read that to prepare our hearts to sing that hymn in just a few minutes. Hebrews 10 was written to, I think, Jewish believers that were contemplating turning away from following Christ and going back to Old Testament, Old Covenant Israel because they were facing persecution, suffering. And the whole point of the book of Hebrews, probably a sermon, is to convince them that Jesus is far better. So why would you follow anything else? And so with that in mind, in the end of the sermon, he says in verse 32, "Recall the former days when after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so entreated." That word partners, by the way, if you've been in our Sunday school, we've been doing a theology of fellowship and a theology of separation. That word partners is in the word group of koinonia, and so that's fellowship. So that's an interesting correlation there. And then in verse 34, he says, "For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, for you have need of," really significant word, endurance, patience. It's that bearing up underneath a heavy burden and keeping on, keeping on. "You have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls." So with that thought, let's sing the hymn, "O Jesus, I have promised to serve thee to the end." 398.
Shall not fear the battle if thou art by my side, nor wander from the pathway if thou wilt be my guide. Oh, let me feel thee near me, the world is ever near. I see the sights that dazzle, the tempting sounds I hear. My foes are ever near me, around me and within. But Jesus, draw thou nearer and shield my soul from sin. Oh, let me hear thee speaking in accents clear and still, above the storms of passion, the murmurs of self-will. Oh, speak to reassure me, to hasten or control. Oh, speak and make me listen, thou guardian of my soul.
Amen. Good singing. Pastor Stevens, come on up.
Okay, well, it's good to be back. We had a very long but very enjoyable trip to Branson and back. If you've ever been there, you know it's a long stretch. There are outlines in the back. I don't know if anybody picked those up or not. Did anybody not get an outline? Would you raise your hand, assuming that you actually want one? Nobody? One person. Okay. Two people. Okay, we're starting a new series, and it's on the first 11 chapters of Genesis. I am really looking forward to this. I thoroughly enjoy studying the book of Genesis, especially those first 11 chapters, and I hope you get as much out of it as I did. Tonight, what we're going to be looking at, we're not going to necessarily be doing a Bible study tonight, but we're laying some foundations for a Bible study. And the material that I have in this session, possibly even next week, is largely taken from Dr. Henry Morris's book on, I can't remember the name of the book, The Genesis Record. And he was the president, I'm not sure he's even living anymore, but he was the president of the Institution for Creation Research. And then his son became very actively involved as well. He's kind of looked to as one of the major scholars in the area of creation and the book of Genesis. And so Dr. Morris makes a statement that the book of Genesis is probably the most important book ever written. Can you suggest why he may have made that statement? The book of Genesis is probably the most important book ever written. Why do you think he would make a statement like that? Do you agree or disagree? Okay. Okay, good point. Any other thoughts on that? John?
It's like the basic foundation for knowing God and knowing who He is and what it's all about.
I like that phrase, basic foundation, because that's a lot of what the book of Genesis is all about. Excuse me, I just remembered a prayer request I don't want to forget later on. Okay, any other thoughts there? Yes?
I probably wouldn't say I think it's the most important, but that it is one of the most foundational ones. Just because, like, other books of the Bible, you know, the ones that talk about the gospel, are equally important, but maybe the foundation is also necessary to set the stage.
I think that's a good answer. I cringed a little bit when I read that for the first time. He goes on to say, without Genesis, the rest of the Bible would be to some degree incomprehensible. And so that's why he makes that statement. And it's basically what you were saying. Ben?
This week it said Genesis is where we came from. Revelation is where we're going.
Good. And the rest of it's where we are, right? Okay, good, good. Without Genesis, the rest of the book would be, the Bible would be to some degree incomprehensible. Genesis is the foundation. And so that qualifies that statement, why he would say that. And so I think we have to have that qualification in order to really agree with what he had to say there. How do you say any book is any more important than another? Only with that caveat, I think. Now, does anybody know what the word Genesis means? Yes, that's what it means. And so that's what we have here. We have beginnings. And, you know, I think right now you're just thinking about how critical it is to have this foundation. Remember what Ken Ham, who's with Beginnings in, what is it called? I always forget. Answers in Genesis. You know, he has the same thought there that Genesis lays the foundation, and other foundation can no man lay. And so Genesis is the foundation. Man wonders much about origins. Men have always, people have always. I can't imagine anybody who has at some time in their life not thought about, where did all this come from? And so if you're leaving God out of the picture, what other option do you have? Of course, there are some that believe in, oh boy, brain fog, theistic evolution, where God created the basics and then everything evolved from there. And that's their best attempt to, to come up with how did we get all of this. Now, probably, as I'm saying these words, you're thinking of all kinds of reasons why evolution is just absolutely impossible, and we will talk about that some as we go along here. So Genesis gives us the only true and reliable account of beginnings. So if you're using the outline, number one, we're looking at origins in Genesis, and again, this is taken from Henry Morris. I think credit where credit's due. And so there are a number of origins that we read about in the book of Genesis. The most obvious place to start is the origin of the universe. That's the most obvious place to start. And he brings out the fact that all other explanations start with matter, energy, and space existing. Anytime somebody wants to talk to me about evolution, especially somebody who believes in evolution, that's one of the first questions I would ask them. I was so disappointed when Ken Ham did the debate with Bill Nye the Science Guy that he didn't ask them this very simple question: how can you get matter from non-matter? Where did space come from? Where did energy come from? I don't know if they still are proponents of the Big Bang Theory. I haven't really studied that for a number of years to see if they've come up with any alternate explanations. Anybody know of anything besides the Big Bang Theory? I think that was the major theory for many years. But it makes no explanation. Where did the matter come from? Where did the space come from? Where did the energy to cause that explosion come from? Blind faith. Now, they will accuse us of having to go by faith because we can't see creation, we can't see God, we can't see heaven or hell. But it takes, when you stop and think about it, it takes a whole lot more faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe in creation. Yes?
It says if you have an explosion, stuff gets magically put back together. It destroys stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't put it back together.
Exactly. So assuming there was a Big Bang, then what? And what is the ultimate? Now, we're talking about matter from non-matter. Where did energy come from? Where did space come from? But what is the ultimate? Where did blank come from? Did you say? Oh, I thought somebody said something.
Man come from.
And let's take it a little bit more precise.
Life.
Life. How do you get life from non-life? So, the book of Genesis tells us how you get life. It tells us where matter came from, where energy came from, where space came from, doesn't it? And it's a totally believable, totally logical explanation. So, those that believe in evolution, have you noticed, make absolutely no attempt to count for the origin of matter, space, or energy. It just all of a sudden was there. And then you think about all the other supposed coincidences that have to happen over time to get to where we are now. It's absolutely, absolutely mathematically, scientifically, and every other way impossible. Russ?
I just remember before I was saved, I did believe in God, but not in a real good way or anything like that. But I remember thinking about that evolution and everything, and then I went, in my mind I went, well, all right, what was before the earth? What was before this? Where was this before this? How did this come in? And I just kept on going back in my time, and all of a sudden inside of my mind it just went poof, and it said, there has to be a God. And it's like, how else could you explain it?
And it baffles me, doesn't it baffle you, why people don't come to that same conclusion? You would think people would. Now, I know in the secular schools, they are taught evolution as a fact, not as a theory, but as a fact. From little up. I came up with a brilliant idea. Maybe this all came from some alien planet, but then, where did they come from? So, it just, yes.
When I think about that whole thing with evolutionists and creationists and that stuff, it's like, well, the evolutionists, they get a bunch of theories and guesses and they're looking at what's here and trying to make an assumption of how it got there and everything. The big Bible, God was there. we got it right here and he gave it to us. What happened there? It's not a matter of belief.
So what's harder to believe? All of this intricate, amazing, the universe, the balance, life itself, the human body, and all of the amazing things that had to be provided for in order for life to continue to exist. Is it easier to believe that it all just happened by incredible coincidences over millions and billions and trillions of years, or God spoke and there it was? Joyce?
Like my sister, she's really smart, and she told me that there's thousands of theories, and it just makes a lot more sense. And then you talk to some of these scholars from college and that, and they're so confused. And when I started watching that, on TV, on Christian TV about creation, and they have so many awesome speakers, and now we have a lot of people to fight that battle, but it makes totally way more sense if they would just read the Bible. I know. And if one of this pastor's wife, when we were at the zoo and we saw the monkeys, she goes, if we came from the monkey, who made the monkey?
Yeah. Where did the monkeys come from? And you go back and back and back. Well, it all came from a hot ball of rock. Where did the hot ball of rock come back? And just there are no ultimate answers. Okay, and I really encourage discussion here, and we're not in a hurry to get through this. So don't worry about expressing your thoughts here. B, also in Genesis, we not only find the origin of the universe, but we find the origin of order and complexity. Does anybody know what the second law of thermodynamics is? As soon as I say it, you'll say, oh yeah, yeah, everything goes from order to disorder. If you don't believe it, go look at your grandkids' room or your kids' room. Still got kids? Yeah. I would say in our case don't, but everything goes from order to disorder. Now that's a scientific, what's the word I'm looking for? Pronouncement or whatever. That's not something Christians came up with. That's just, it's just observable science. Nothing goes from disorder to order. That's what Ben was talking about earlier. You've all heard the illustration probably of taking a watch apart, throwing it in the dryer, and how long would it take before it came out telling the right time. Everything goes from order to disorder. And then order and complexity never arise spontaneously. Never. Yet that's what we're told that we ought to believe, that all of this order, all of this complexity, the balance of nature, the incredible, the pull of gravity, everything that it would take for life to continue to exist, all of a sudden just, wow, there it was. So order and complexity are always generated by a prime cause programmed to produce such order. Creatures demand a creator. All this came from nothing, really. C, also in Genesis, we have the origin of the solar system. There are all kinds of unsatisfactory attempts to devise naturalistic theories. Where did light come from? Sun. Where did the sun come from? Where did water come from? From nowhere. Where did the elements come from? Why didn't Ken Ham ask some of those questions that drove me crazy? They're just questions that have no logical answer. Fourth, the origin of life. How can living systems proceed from non-living chemicals? Scientists make a stab at trying to create life in the laboratory, and some of their feeble attempts, but they don't prove anything. They don't produce life. So the infinite complexity of plants and animals, the marvels of the reproductive process is inexplainable and inimitable. Just something as simple as a plant, you know? How many of you had to take a course in biology in school? Probably all of us. You had to study plants, didn't you? And even they are complex. They're a simple form of life, but they're complex, and there's so much variety. And everything that a plant or an animal or a human would need to survive, voila, it all evolved at the same time. How convenient. Do you detect a note of sarcasm? Sorry about that. I didn't mean to be sarcastic. Yes, I did. E is the origin of man. The most highly organized and complex entity in the universe. And we have within us elements copying the image of God, the ability to love, the ability to reason, the ability to worship. F is the origin of marriage. It's not just something that, all of a sudden people looked around and said, I see there are two different kinds of humans here. Maybe if we get together, we can preserve the human race, right? So marriage is not just a convenient structure, optionally replaced by any other group men conceive of. The family is the ideal way to raise children. And look at where we're at now in America, just over the last couple of years. Look at how much the ideal family unit that worked for centuries is now rare. People just live together. And I don't have to say any more because you know what all is going on today. So God ordained marriage. Perversions came later. And the family works best. If the father is following biblical mandates given to him in Scripture, the mother does the same thing, you've got an ideal opportunity to raise children that will fear God and live for him and get saved. The origin of evil. Where did evil come from? You say, well, it's our nature. Why? Why do people hate, steal, and commit suicide? Why? And I suppose the answer would be it's just human nature. But the Bible tells us where evil came from. The Bible tells us why people hate and steal and commit suicide and on and on and on. And the more a society, the more a person leaves God out of the picture, the more corrupt the thought process, the lifestyle, and look where we're at today. Here's another one, the origin of language. The chatterings of animals versus the intelligent communication systems. One of the reasons why I believe in trichotomy is that very thing. I believe that a plant, there's three forms of life. A plant has a body. It has no soul, it has no spirit. An animal has a body and a soul. It can do things a plant can't do, obviously, but it has no concept of a creator. Then you have man who has body, soul, and spirit, which is made in the image of God, the triune God. And to me, that's the most logical belief system. I know there are those who believe that the soul and the spirit are the same. 1 Thessalonians talks about your whole body, soul, and spirit, and elsewhere, etc. But the origin of language. Language in general, as well as various national languages. So we would be informed in elementary school that it probably started with ugh. And you know what ugh means, right? And then from ugh you got mm. And all of a sudden, you're talking to each other. Can you imagine a child who never hears language, is never taught in any way, being able to communicate? How do we learn language? Well, somebody else teaches us, or we listen to somebody else, or we read about it, or something. Some way we get it. Where did language come from, And a lot of evolutionists, that doesn't even occur to them to even think about that. But, of course, Genesis gives us the answer. Where did language start, by the way? Yeah, started in the Garden of Eden, didn't it? And then where did languages develop? Tower of Babel. That was an amazing way to get people to spread out. They were going to all keep together, and God had told them to spread out and fill the universe, and they were going to all stick together. And so all of a sudden you're talking to this guy, and all of a sudden you can't understand the word he's saying. You find somebody else that knows what you're saying, and you group off, and off you go. Origin of language. I is the origin of government. And I see that my time is already gone. We'll go through the origins, and then we'll have to stop. The origin of government states that man is responsible for his own actions. And government exists for maintenance of orderly social structures. Where did government come from? Man just had the idea, maybe we should elect a president or a king or whatever. But the Bible tells us the origin of government. Genesis tells us the origin of government. J is the origin of culture. Genesis speaks of urbanization. Cities are built. It talks about metallurgy in the early chapters of the book of Genesis. Music, agriculture, animal husbandry, writing, education, navigation, all of these we see in the book of Genesis. How did all that get started? K is the origin of nations. Everybody accepts the essential unity of the human race, but how did distinct nations and races develop? Well, again, we have that. And I don't like that thought of races developing, because I don't believe in races. I believe there's one race, it's called the human race. And there is a book out. I loaned it to a pastor friend of mine, never got it back, and he never remembers me giving it to him. But it's called One Blood. Anybody familiar with that book? Okay. And what it does is just makes it very obvious how the different so-called races got started. And I believe that Adam and Eve had all the genes to have people who are very light-complected. Eventually, two light-complected people get together, and more, and this selective breeding, you get people with blue eyes, blonde hair, and so on. Very understandable, very logical explanation. How about the origin of religion? Where did God consciousness come from? Well, man just had to create God. Remember what Karl Marx said? Religion is the opiate of the people. They need something higher than them to place their hope on. Animals don't have a God consciousness. Where did that come from? And then finally, the origin of the chosen people. There is the enigma of the Israelites, but through them, God gave the world what? Yeah. And before that, or during that and after that to some degree, the Bible, especially the Old Testament. You know, Luke, I think, is the only non-Jew author of Scripture, off the top of my head. So they gave the world the Bible, the Messiah, and the knowledge of the true God. And how in the world can Israel possibly still exist as a race, leave alone a nation? Well, the Bible makes that clear too. Genesis makes that clear. So, okay, our time is up. Any thoughts, comments, discussion? Okay, I only have a few prayer requests. I think I'll read part of a letter from Scott Williquit. The School of Church Planting was established by Roger